Most people think you need a full cart to eat well every week. You need variety, they say. You need options. You need to keep rotating what you buy so you don't get bored or run short. And almost every grocery store in the country is designed around exactly that belief. Aisles and aisles of choices meant to convince you that more is always better. But here is the truth. The folks who eat the best, waste the least, and spend the least are usually the ones buying roughly the same 15 things every single week. Not because they're boring, because they're smart. I'm Ruth Coleman, and I've been cooking for families, teaching people how to stretch a grocery budget, and thinking hard about what actually belongs in a kitchen for the better part of 20 years. I've watched households of every size and income work through this, and the pattern is always the same. The people who plan around a small, reliable core of groceries almost always come out ahead. And the people who show up to the store without a list, grabbing whatever looks good or whatever's on sale, almost always spend more and waste more. This video is about that core, those 15 items. Now, before I get into the list, let me clear something up. There's a myth that eating on a tight weekly grocery plan means you're sacrificing nutrition. That's not true. There's another myth that says the only way to save money at the grocery store is with coupons and sale cycles. Coupons help sometimes, don't get me wrong, but chasing sales week to week without a plan leads most folks to buy things they didn't need and wouldn't have bought otherwise. The real savings come from simplicity, from knowing what you're going to cook before you walk in the door, and buying only what makes those meals happen. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which 15 groceries I think belong on your weekly list, why each one earns its place, and how to think about building meals around them so nothing goes to waste. You'll walk out of the grocery store with a full week of real food in your cart and money still in your pocket. And if you want to go deeper than what I can cover in a single video, the fuller breakdown, the meal building methods, the strategies for making this work week after week, the guide's QR code is right there on the left side of your screen right now. Open your phone's camera app and point it at that code to get it. You don't have to do it this second. That same QR code stays pinned in the top right corner of the screen for the rest of the video, so you can grab it whenever you're ready and keep watching. Let's get into the list. I've grouped these into sections because that's how I actually think about them, by what job they do in the kitchen. Number 1 is eggs. If there's one food that earns its place on this list more than almost anything else, it's eggs. They're protein, they're fat, they stretch meals, they hold things together, they work at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A dozen eggs for around $2 or $3. The price moves around, but it's almost always one of the cheapest sources of complete protein you can buy. I'd put eggs on this list before I'd put almost anything else. Number 2 is dried beans or lentils. Not canned, dried. A 1-pound bag of dried lentils or black beans costs very little and makes enough food to fill a pot that feeds 4 or 5 people more than once. Lentils are the easiest because they don't need soaking. You simmer them for about 30 minutes, add some seasoning, and you've got a meal. I've made soup, stew, and grain bowls out of a single bag of lentils and stretched it across 3 or 4 meals. That is value you cannot argue with. A bag of green or brown lentils at most stores runs under $2. That works out to pennies per serving, which is a number almost nothing else in the store can match. Number 3 is canned fish, tuna, sardines, or salmon. I know some folks have a complicated relationship with sardines, but hear me out. Canned fish is shelf-stable, inexpensive, and loaded with protein and healthy fats that most of us don't get nearly enough of. A can of tuna or sardines costs about $1 or a little more, and it can anchor a full lunch or a light dinner. If you want to hold on, I'm going to get to the item near the end of this list that quietly saves people the most money, and it's probably not the one you'd guess. Number 4 is oats. Rolled oats, not the instant packets full of sugar. A canister of old-fashioned oats typically runs less than $4 and will last you most of the month. They're breakfast, they're a base for baked goods, and in a pinch, they're a filling snack. They're plain food, and plain food is underrated. Oats have been keeping people going for generations, and there's a reason for that. Number 5 is rice. White rice or brown rice, your preference. But I lean toward white rice for most kitchens because it stores longer, cooks faster, and pairs with virtually anything. A 2-pound bag stretches across multiple meals. Rice is the backbone of cuisines all over the world for a reason. It fills a plate without emptying your wallet. Number 6 is olive oil, or a good neutral cooking oil. You need fat in the kitchen. It's how things cook properly, how flavor develops, and how you get a meal from raw ingredients to something worth eating. I use olive oil for most things. You don't need a giant expensive bottle. A reasonably priced mid-size bottle lasts a few weeks with normal use. Now, if you're finding these first few items obvious, stay with me, because this is where the guide becomes genuinely useful. The deeper strategies for building flexible weekly menus around these staples, stuff this short video can only sketch. That's exactly what the guide walks through. Open your camera app and point it at the QR code in the top right corner of your screen whenever you want to pull that up. Number 7 is onions. I cannot overstate how much an onion does for a meal. It's the start of almost every savory dish worth eating. A 3-pound bag of yellow onions is one of the cheapest things you can put in your cart and one of the most useful. They last weeks on a shelf or a pantry rack. Buy them every week without thinking about it. Number 8 is garlic. Same reasoning. A bulb of garlic, or a small mesh bag of a few bulbs, costs very little and transforms simple ingredients into food that actually tastes like something. Fresh garlic from a bulb is different from the jarred, pre-minced kind. Not that jarred garlic is wrong in a pinch, but if you haven't gone back to fresh bulbs, give it a try for a week and notice the difference. Number 9 is cabbage. Here is the item on this list that most folks overlook, and it is one of the hardest working vegetables in a frugal kitchen. A whole head of green cabbage costs somewhere around $2 on average and will keep in your refrigerator for 2 to 3 weeks. That's weeks, not days. You can shred it for slaws, sauté it with onion and garlic, braise it, add it to soups, or eat it raw. Cabbage is the vegetable your grandparents ate without thinking much about it, and they were right to. A single head weighing roughly 2 pounds can yield 6 generous servings, which puts the cost per serving well under 50 cents. That is a number almost no other fresh vegetable comes close to. Number 10 is carrots. A 2-pound bag of carrots is a couple of dollars. They last in the fridge for a long time. They roast beautifully. They go into soups and stews. They work as a raw snack, and they add natural sweetness to almost any dish. If you don't have carrots on your weekly list right now, add them. They pull their weight every time. Number 11 is bananas. For fruit, bananas are almost impossible to beat on price and nutrition. They're filling, they're portable, they're sweet without being junk food, and they're available everywhere. When they start getting a little too ripe for eating fresh, freeze them. Frozen bananas blend into smoothies, mash into baked goods, and are not a thing you ever need to throw away. Number 12 is whole milk or plain yogurt. You need something from the dairy case. I'd say whole milk for most households. It goes in coffee, it goes in oatmeal, it goes in baking, It keeps kids and grandkids fed at breakfast. But if you're not a big milk drinker, a large container of plain yogurt earns its spot just as well. Plain yogurt is one of the most versatile things in the fridge. It works as a condiment, as a base for dressings, as a substitute for sour cream, and as a breakfast with some honey and fruit. Don't skip the dairy case. Number 13 is butter. Not margarine, real butter. I know there was a long stretch of time when everyone was told to avoid butter, and I'll be honest, I believed it for a while too. But butter has been in kitchens for centuries. It makes everything taste better, and a pound of it goes further than you'd think when you're cooking at home. Buy it in blocks, not in individual stick packets if you can, because the block is usually a better deal. Before I get to the last two, I want to mention something. If you're watching this and thinking about pulling this together into a real weekly plan for your household, the guide is sitting right there in the top right corner of your screen. For anyone who wants more than a list and actually needs the thinking behind making a weekly grocery routine stick, your phone camera pointed at that code is where that starts. It goes further on this than I can here. Number 14 is canned tomatoes. This is one of the most useful things in a pantry. Crushed tomatoes, whole tomatoes, diced, any of them. A 14-ounce can runs about $1 or a little more, and it is the base for pasta sauces, soups, stews, shakshuka, braises, and more. I keep at least 4 or 5 cans on hand at all times. Canned tomatoes are a genuinely different product from fresh tomatoes in a lot of applications. They're concentrated, cooked, and at a depth that a fresh tomato in February cannot give you. And number 15, here is the one I promised you earlier, is flour. Plain all-purpose flour. A 5-pound bag costs very little, and it is quietly the most powerful thing on this entire list. Here is why. Flour lets you make things instead of buying them. Bread, pancakes, biscuits, thickened soups, coatings for pan-fried proteins, pasta, if you want to go that far. The cost difference between buying those things pre-made and making them from flour at home is enormous over the course of a month or a year. A loaf of store-bought sandwich bread can run $3 to $5. The same loaf made from flour, water, salt, and yeast costs under $1 in ingredients. Multiply that across 52 weeks, and you are looking at real money back in your pocket. Flour sits at the center of home cooking the way it always has, and the folks who've drifted away from it are almost always the ones spending the most at the store. Now let me tie this together, because a list of 15 things only means something if you know how to use them. The core idea is that these 15 groceries are not random. They're a system. Eggs, beans, canned fish, and yogurt give you protein options at every price point. Oats, rice, and flour give you carbohydrates and the base for real homemade food. Oil and butter handle all your cooking fat. Onions, garlic, cabbage, and carrots give you the savory flavor layer and the vegetable base for dozens of meals. Canned tomatoes give you a sauce you can build almost anything on. And bananas give you fruit and sweetness without spending much. You may be thinking, what about meat? What about chicken or ground beef? And here is my honest answer. Those have a place, but they don't belong on a fixed weekly list the same way these 15 do. Meat is where you watch for a genuine deal and buy accordingly. On sale, in a larger package you can portion and freeze. The 15 groceries above are what you buy consistently, regardless of sales, because they're cheap enough that the sale price doesn't move the needle much, and you need them every single week. This week, I'd encourage you to write out these 15 items and compare them to what you actually bought last week. See where the overlap is, and where the gaps are. Most people find they're already buying about half of these regularly. They just haven't been thinking of them as a system. Next week, try buying all 15 and planning 5 or 6 meals around them before you go to the store. See what the cart total looks like. I think it will surprise you. There is genuinely no marketing budget behind telling someone that eggs, onions, lentils, and flour are the backbone of a good kitchen. Nobody is selling a course on buying a head of cabbage. That's why this kind of knowledge tends to stay in families and not make it to television. It's the practical, unglamorous truth about how careful people have always fed themselves well without spending more than they needed to. And if this list sparks something for you and you want to go further, the full guide is a scan away. Your phone camera pointed at that QR code in the top right corner of your screen will take you there. It covers the deeper strategies, the fuller thinking behind making a routine like this work long-term, the kind of detail this video can only introduce. Now I want to hear from you. What is the one item on your weekly grocery list that you could not live without? The thing you buy every single week without question. Leave it in the comments below. I read them, and some of the best ideas I've heard over the years have come from the folks watching these videos. Next time, we're going to talk about the meals you can build when your pantry has just these basics in it. The kinds of dinners that cost almost nothing and still taste like you spent hours in the kitchen. If these videos have been useful to you, hitting that subscribe button means you won't miss what's coming. I'm glad you were here. See you in the next one.